Hello everyone, TLSG here, back again with another Marvel Snap video. So the eye patch season is coming to an end soon. It's either going to be this video or the next video. That's the last one. I just want to make sure I give it enough time to recover before trying to wear contacts or go without the eye patch. So today we were able to pull a mystery card. We just didn't catch it on video. So the card that we pulled today was Giganto. So Giganto is one of the strongest 6-power cards in the game. He does have the unique drawback that he can only be played in the left location though. But compared to other cards, he is only outpowered by Infinite, Red Skull, and Destroyer, all of which have their own unique limitations as well. So when thinking of Giganto, where can we slot him? We can actually slot him into quite a few decks. He's just not as consistent because if it turns out that the left lane is not competitive and he's your only 6-drop card, then you lose a lot of board presence. So how do we use him consistently? Well, he seems like he would slot really well into a Large Minion deck. Now, Large Minion deck, in my opinion, is one of the strongest deck archetypes right now, just because it has the ability to pump out so much power so very quickly. So for our first run with Giganto, I am going to slot him into a Large Minion deck. Let me jump over and draft it, and I will be right back. All right, so we actually drafted Giganto in a couple of different decks, and just never found one that just felt really solid. I wanted to try and avoid doing a Large Minion deck, just because at this point I'm just refining it. I've covered it before, but now it's coming down to really refining that deck archetype. So we tried Giganto in a Death Wave type deck, who performed okay, but it was still not as consistent as what I would want in a deck that I'm going to showcase. We tried him in a few other deck archetypes, and he just didn't do incredibly well. So what we did was we reverted back to our Large Minion deck, and at this point we are refining it, like I said. Up above, I'm going to throw the deck list that we used most recently for a video, and then I'm going to go through some of the changes that we did. So the most important one being that we added in additional cycle cards. So now we have Okoye and Wave in our deck. That's going to allow for some cheaper cycles. Okoye is going to buff up the cards that are in our deck, so then if we hit her twice, if we cycle through her twice, our Large Minions are going to become even larger, which should help us in mirror matches. And then we have Wave. So Wave is a card that if we cycle her out of our hand and out of the board back into our deck, the on reveal lets us follow up with a 6-power card naturally onto the board next turn, which we have plenty of in this deck. And then even if we say drop an Okoye into Lockjaw and it pulls out Wave, we're not going to completely brick that lane because of it. And so that is what we're going with. We're wanting to make the Lockjaw rotation or the cycle more consistent. So before, in our previous deck list, we could have done a Lockjaw drop into a Professor X, into a lane that was not won, bricking the entire lane for us, or even if it was won by just a small margin, that then bricks our ability to cycle our cards moving forward. We're not able to push out any more power, and then we have to figure out how to win one of the other 2 lanes. So another big change for this deck list is we took out Odin. So I started thinking about Odin, and if we are playing the Lady Sif Ghost Rider combo in unison, Odin is okay, but then it forces you to play both of them in the same lane, then kind of restricting your ability to cycle them. It feels a little bit clunkier than what it should. And then if we did cycle into Odin, most of the time it didn't trigger any kind of ability. It didn't really trigger any upside, and it was a lower power 6-cost card that we have better, stronger alternatives for. And so in its place, we added Giganto, our new card, which is a 14-power card. If we need to drop this in the left lane naturally, we can. 14 power is going to be massive on turn 6 or even turn 4 or 5 after we drop a wave. And then it's also going to be massive to cycle into. And then for our last slot, our last change, we added Vision. So I was really torn about this one. Iron Man really helps you excel in lanes that you already have 1 or 2 large minions in. But Vision allows us to capitalize on locations where we can't play. So let's say the opponent floods a lane. We're still going to be able to sneak power into that lane later on in the game, very likely securing that location. And then if we drew into Sanctum Sanctorum with our previous deck list, we had no way of pushing power over there. So then all of a sudden we're limited to 2 lanes. And then if the opponent is even running as much as a Squirrel Girl, they would win that Sanctum Sanctorum location, giving them a very large advantage. So Vision is going to allow us to do a couple of things. We're going to be able to cycle through more cards with Lockjaw. So let's say we Lockjaw, we cycle a Sunspot, it pulls out a Vision. We can then move Vision out of that Lockjaw lane to then continue cycling cards. But this deck list is a very standard large minion cycle, but it has tweaks and refinements so that anytime we cycle a card, even if we get the worst possible outcome, it's not going to be game breaking where we have to retreat immediately. So what I'm going for with this deck is consistent high power output. With that being said, let's go ahead and jump in and see how it goes. So first up we have Tai Honline. In our hand we have Okoye, we have our Vision, which always feels a little bad to play naturally. And we're not going to be able to let him buff up. It just feels stronger to draw into him or cycle into him. But we do have a couple of our other pieces that we're going to be able to play into. That feels awful. So the Space Throne is our second location. And with the Space Throne, we both have a squirrel there already. So we're not going to be able to change anything. If they have, let's say, like a blue Marvel for some reason, that really subpar card is going to swing this lane and this location for them. I don't think I force a card here. I don't think I drop a Koye, especially considering how limited our space is. So they have an Odin, which they discarded with Lady Sif, but it's important to note that even if they now drop that Ghost Rider, they're not going to be able to cycle through both of those cards. So they're not going to be able to do Lady Sif, Ghost Rider in the same lane to resummon Odin and then re-trigger that ability because of the disruption with the squirrel. And so that's one of the reasons I opted to not go with Odin anymore, just because it's a little bit harder to use, it's a little bit clunkier. So I think we go ahead and show them that we have a pretty solid discard in our Infinite, as long as we draw into our Ghost Rider piece. And so then they have Odin, they cap out this location. So now we know that we only have to put 14 power over there. And so they had the really strong Lady Sif Ghost Rider combo, but Odin being on the weaker side of that combo, unless you are using it to cap out the lane by doing Lady Sif Ghost Rider Odin and then it pulls in another 6 cost, there's too much downside with it. Ooh, next up we have Waiwu Dev. So I'm fairly certain that Waiwu Dev is one of the devs of the game that is pretty active in the Discord. So let's see what we can do. Let's see if we can make some interesting fun things happen. So we do have our Lady Sif here, we have our Ghost Rider, and then we have Vision in hand. I don't think that is strong enough for us to discard into naturally. I think we go ahead and just play patient, we wait one additional turn, we're going to be able to drop our Lockjaw, most likely into this unknown location because Negative Zone is really difficult to cycle your lower power cards. Okay, and so then they drop Invisible Woman, interesting. And so that's a pretty cool Invisible Woman variant, but that's going to make whatever card they drop behind Invisible Woman not reveal until the end of the game. So interesting. I wonder what they could have there. And then Kamar Taj being the final location, giving us no downside to dropping cards here. So I think we're going to start our cycle next turn. So we're going to go ahead and drop Lockjaw naturally on turn 3. We don't know what this card is. I can only imagine. Invisible Woman just creates so much element of surprise. So that could be a really strong card. We know that it's not going to be over 3 power. And so we can kind of play accordingly to that. But I think what we do here is we drop both our Wave and our Sunspot. We have both the Lady Sif and the Ghost Rider, so we know we're not going to draw into either of those and brick a card that we don't necessarily intend to. And so we should be able to be guaranteed that we're going to get a good upside out of this cycle. Then next turn we're going to be able to play Magneto. We won't be able to draw the Invisible Woman in. We'll be able to draw Devil Dino in to the left. And so then our Wave coming off, let's go ahead and see what that rotation pulls into. Could be, okay, Chavez, a very strong cycle tool. And then if we get a big enough lead here, we may go ahead and kind of retreat away from this location. So then we do get the upside of both the Jubilee pulling in the Giganto. The only downside there is that we did max out this lane. So if they have a Shang-Chi that they drop here on turn 6, that will destroy these two, leaving us with only 3 power. So that piece does feel pretty bad, but actually, so I was thinking we drop Magneto over here, but in our deck we still have Infinite, and then we know we're going to be able to drop whatever the highest cost card in our hand is, so potentially Vision there. I think we do Magneto here, so we compete for this lane as well. And then we're going to be able to do the Lady Sif Ghost Rider combo on the following turn to either get an Infinite onto the board. Ooh, that Onslaught is a little bit scary. So I think what we can do is we can drop our Lady Sif Ghost Rider, that's going to pull an okay vision out onto the board. I am going to go ahead and drop Sunspot here just so that we can have it on the board. I'm really curious what this card is that's hidden behind Invisible Woman. But that's going to push out a decent amount of power here. It's not going to be great, but they are going to need to drop resources into Kamartage to finish off winning this lane. And then I think we have a good shot at winning these other two. So let's go ahead and let this finish playing out. So if they leave, oh no, they left. I never get to know what that mystery card was. We will always wonder. Next up we have Subpar Glutes, which, man, you need to do better. You need to do better. We do draw into Tinker's Workshop right off the bat, which is going to allow us to drop our Lady Sif. And I think we go ahead and do that. I think we don't necessarily need these in hand. And we're going to be able to cycle cards starting on turn 4 with our Lockjaw. So this allows us to pump out a lot of power early. And I actually think we may go into mid lane with this, because if we draw into our Giganto and we play him naturally, we'd have to play him into the left lane. So we need to be cognizant of that when we're playing and when we're dropping cards. That's a very unfortunate location that popped up for us there. We passed this turn, but that really limits what we're able to do here. And so I'm really glad we're not anticipating the Lady Sif Ghost Rider Odin combo. And they get a pretty good upside in their Carnage there from Savage Land. So with them running these destruction type cards, I'm curious if they're running a Death Wave style deck. And so we are going to need to push out more power than they can potentially have with their Death combo. And so I'm going to drop our Lockjaw in the left lane. They have Scorpion, which interesting. That is an interesting choice. You don't see Scorpion ran all that often. That, of course, double debuffs our cards in our hand with -1 power each time. Normally, I don't cycle through Jubilee, but I think in this scenario, we don't really want the -1 Jubilee onto the board. That will give us 2 cards here, potentially being our Infinite, our Chavez, and then our lower cost cards such as Wave or Okoye. So let's go ahead and lock that in. That's going to give us 2 cycles. They do drop a Debris here. So they're running... Oh, how awful. We have one chance. One shot, one opportunity to get everything we ever wanted. We cycle our -1 Jubilee into Infinite there to really save this lane. Otherwise, they are really pressing us and capping us for space. So now is the next question. Do we drop something like a Ghost Rider Sunspot, knowing that we'll draw into our Chavez next turn? And then if they have a Shang-Chi, then we lose here. That would give them the advantage in this lane. So I don't think we snap because of that. Because this deck may be running a Shang-Chi, I don't think we snap here. I think we kind of play conservative. We do drop Magneto, which if they had any 3 or 4 cost cards would pull it over, but they didn't have any revealed just yet. And so then they drop Doc Ock, which of course typically would pull our cards into the lane. But since this location was already almost capped out, it's not going to be able to do that. So now it comes down to the Shang-Chi play, which I really think they have. I think they have the Shang-Chi here. That's going to push this lane for them, and there's not going to be anything we can do about it other than retreat. So if we were not filming, I would retreat here. I think there is a high enough chance that this kind of disruption deck runs a Shang-Chi, because a good follow-up to a Doc Ock in a lane is dropping a Shang-Chi afterwards to destroy any of the big minions that you pulled out. So I think there's a very good chance that they have Shang-Chi here, but I want to see it play out. No, they dropped 2 cards over here. What did they have? So they have the Spider-Woman, which is going to be the double discounter, the double card affliction. I don't know why that phrase is so hard for me to get out today. They were discounting our cards. They were reducing our cards' power with Spider-Woman. But then they dropped Colossus as well as a kind of low-cost card that's not affected by cards that drop other cards' power level, so like Hazmat. We were able to sneak out the win here. I really anticipated the Shang-Chi, because that's something that once a lane is capped out, you can't really do anything, and you're really susceptible to those swings, is the only downside to capping out a lane early. Next up we have Jump Shed. We do look like we draw into our Lockjaw, so I don't want to drop Okoye just yet. I want to use him as a cheap cycle tool. But worth noting is that we have our Ghost Rider. So that takes away some of the kind of downside or potential downside from cycling cards, because if we cycle into Ghost Rider before we discard a card with Lady Sif, then you lose a lot of the potential to pump out a lot of power very easily with this deck. So we do draw into the Lady Sif portion as well. So I think next turn what we're going to do is probably, ooh, and they have a Moon Knight, so it hits our Lady Sif. Interesting. Okay, so they're running a discard deck. I didn't see what card got discarded for them, because I was too worried about what was going to get discarded for us. So typically I would hold our Ghost Rider here, but since we can cycle Ghost Rider back into our deck, that will resummon our Lady Sif here, which is going to discard our Magneto. And then we have the opportunity to draw back into our Ghost Rider to resummon Magneto later on. And of course we drop our Okoye first so that we can buff our deck before we start pulling cards from our deck with that cycle. So we do draw into Giganto there, so a very, very large card for us to draw into, which makes me a little bit, and the wave comes in and absolutely obliterates our chances with Lady Sif discarding our Magneto. So we did get Vision here, so if we need to rotate a card or drop a card, we can to cycle out. But I think what we do is we drop a Magneto. We have priority here. Actually, we don't necessarily mind if we're card locked next turn either. So maybe we do. Maybe we drop Magneto into this left lane. That would pull their Moon Knight over. So if they drop an Odin here, then it's going to make them discard a card, and it's going to make us discard a card as well. But it could potentially hit the Infinite, giving us a chance to high roll our Ghost Rider combo if we pull it in with Jubilee. And so they drop a Magneto as well. So that gives us the ability to cycle here again. So since this is not capped out, that gives us a lot of potential upside here. So I think what we do is we go ahead and, do we ever go with the guaranteed cycle of cycling our Sunspot? What do we have left in our deck? We have Okoye, we have Wave, and we have Ghost Rider. So none of those are worth, in my opinion, cycling into. So I think what we do is just hope that they don't have the Lady Sif Ghost Rider combo here. If they do, it's going to be really hard to compete with. But I think we move our Vision over into this left lane, which would give us the lead in this lane. We wouldn't have to worry about it cycling out. And then we drop our Chavez here to have a decent power level in these two, and they would have to swing one of those two. So even if they did the Lady Sif Ghost Rider combo, they wouldn't be able to capitalize and finalize it. So we eventually found the right play line. It just took a little bit longer than what Jump Shed was willing to wait. Next up we have O Marches. So in our hand, we get Olympia as the first location. So in our hand, we have a lot of tools and a lot of resources. So I think we do need to drop a card this turn. Otherwise, we're going to be capped out for hand space. So I'm going to drop Sunspot into this middle location, knowing that Giganto, we have him in hand. We're probably going to have to play him naturally into Olympia if it comes down to that, if we don't discard him with our Lady Sif. Ooh, so unfortunate that the Superflow is what pops up there. So we are going to pass this turn. Unfortunately, they're going to have an upside in energy pretty much the entire game. And so then they have Hellcow, so they have both Swarm and Apocalypse. So what that tells me is that I'm probably going to want to hold Wave until turn 5. That way, most of the time, they're going to want to swarm the board with all of their swarms on the very last turn. And that's going to let them only drop one card, and that being their Apocalypse. So let's go ahead and drop our Lockjaw here. We're going to draw into one additional card. We are still missing our Lady Sif from being able to do the Lady Sif Ghost Rider combo, but since we have Ghost Rider in hand, we're not worried about cycling into it so much as we would have been otherwise. And so then we do draw into this piece of it. What do we say we cycle out our Lady Sif? That's going to allow us to discard a card. We can then play our Ghost Rider where needed. We don't have to worry about spacing limitations so much. And then next turn we're going to want to drop. Our Wave. So we're going to have to resummon Ghost Rider on turn 6 actually. So that becomes a little bit awkward, needing to drop Wave on the turn 5. but I think we do that anyways. They're going to do what, the Lady Sif, and Morbius. So Morbius coming in pretty big with how many cards they've discarded. But we're going to drop a Koye, we're going to cycle out, we get the Chavez upside. Lady Sif is going to discard Magneto, which is going to be able to, can it pull in any of their cards? And we get the Jubilee, which then pulls in Vision. So Vision allows us a lot of flexibility in being able to move around the board, which is very, very nice. And being turn 5, all cards have to be played in the Avengers compound this turn. We don't necessarily want to drop, we really want to drop our Ghost Rider here to resummon our Magneto. But that's just not going to be in the cards. So our Magneto would be able to pull in their one Swarm and their Swordmaster wherever we drop him. But I think we drop the Wave to make sure that they can't swarm the rest of the board next turn. So they do resummon one of their discarded swarms. We know that they have discarded 5 cards. I'm not sure how many times their Apocalypse has been discarded, but I think dropping a Ghost Rider here, that will resummon our Magneto. So that's going to be 5, 6, 7. That's going to be 10. That's going to be 22. So then if we pull in a Swordmaster, that then caps out this location. So we have to drop it here. And then if their Apocalypse has been discarded more than once, they win. So what we ended up going with was dropping our Ghost Rider into the far right lane. That is going to swing this location for us. It's not going to move any cards around, but we moved our Vision from Olympia over into the Superflow, which allowed us to put enough power here to, if they dropped their Apocalypse here, we would have still won this lane. But our Sunspot was able to buff up just over the 14 that they already had, which allowed us to win 2 locations. So that was a really tough one to figure out, and it took a lot of analyzing and trying to figure out where was best to play and where that power dispersion was going to be. But I think once we figured it out, we had no risk of losing this game. Okay, so we do start with Crimson Cosmos as the first location. So that is typically a little bit harder of a location to play cards into, but since we have Giganto, we have a lot of high power cards. We don't have to worry so much about naturally dropping cards in there. We can also drop a Jubilee. It becomes a little bit easier for us to drop cards there than a normal style deck. And so they drop Armor here. So that tells me they may be running a destruction type deck, a destroyer type deck rather. So do we ever, and we dropped our Infinite, so we have a really strong card queued up if we can draw into Ghost Rider. So do we ever drop our Wave here? That's going to allow us to drop a strong card next turn in a Magneto. And I think we do. I think that's what we want to play. And then if this is a 3-cost card, it will be able to pull it over, so they're not going to get the upside of the Stark Tower there. Not that it's a major upside, but it's an upside nonetheless. And I think we keep our Giganto kind of a secret right now, because that's going to be a lot of power that's really not going to be anticipated in the left lane. Not very many people have or are running Giganto, and so it becomes a little bit sneakier of a play to be able to drop it over there. So we do drop our Magneto, so they do have Destroyer. And so since we pulled a card out over into the vault, it actually destroyed that one as well. Unfortunately, it wasn't a stronger card, but they know that we're not going to be able to resummon our Infinite here. So to be able to compete with their 18 power destroyer, we would have to invest quite a few resources, and I don't know that we'd want to invest that much in that location. So the vault is going to be locking down after this turn. I think what we do is we drop our Vision here. Our Vision is going to get a 2 power buff and grow up to 9 power. And then we're going to be able to move Vision as we want to, which is going to give us some strategic advantage here in being able to drop the high power card, move it over into Crimson Cosmos if we want to. We're going to be able to keep it in Stark Tower if we want. But I think what we do is we assume that they're not going to be able to outpower this much power. So that's going to be 23 power. So we can pump 23 power into this left side, or we can do an additional 10 here. And then if they drop their 10, then we end up losing that lane. It all comes down to what we think. And we could actually, if we wanted to high roll, we have a 33% chance of drawing into Ghost Rider here, which would resummon our Infinite. So depending on where we think they're going to play. Do we think they're going to drop a Chavez here? If so, that becomes an issue, and we should have stacked here. But I think the safest play is just going with the coin flip. This gives us basically a 50-50 shot. They're either going to drop resources here, or they're going to cap out this lane with their Ant-Man and some of their other cards. I think maybe they have a Jubilee or a Chavez even that they'll drop here. But it's a coin flip either way. And so they do drop an Iron Man into Stark Tower, which fortunately enough, we did not go with stacking our resources there. The Giganto is going to be able to be enough power, and then the Vision move. So I think Vision is the MVP of this deck so far. And then Giganto just having enough power that it's going to push us up over that edge. And they didn't drop enough resources early, so they didn't have anything in the vault. So guys, I know that I talk about the win rate of my decks whenever I pilot them quite often, but this deck list just went 6-0. So all 6 games that I showcased were in a row. They were all consecutive. There were no losses in between. There were several games that I thought I was going to lose or that were very, very close, that we just barely squeaked out with a win. But I think overall, this deck list does what it is designed to do very, very well. The hard counters being things like a Shang-Chi. Those things you can't anticipate as much, but otherwise this deck list feels so solid. I am very, very satisfied with how versatile this deck list has become. From our very first Large Minion deck, where we just pumped out power, we blocked out lanes, and then we couldn't really react from there. But this deck list gives us a lot more versatility to kind of adjust and play things differently depending on what we have in hand, what the opponent has on board, and it just feels really, really solid. So with that being said, I am going to go ahead and end the video here with a perfect 100% record, which I have never done with a deck list before, especially running 6, 7, 5, between 5 and 7 games typically per video. So this deck list feels really, really strong. I think I'm going to pilot it a little bit off video as well and see if my results stay the same. So after I edit the video, while I'm waiting for everything to render, I'm going to play this deck list some more, and I'm going to leave a comment down below of what my final record is after playing the games that are not going to be included in this video. I hope that you guys enjoyed the video. Thank you guys again so much for all of your continued support, your comments. I love interacting with you guys. I do plan on doing at least a short live stream this upcoming Friday, as long as my eye continues to improve and do better. If you do want to join the live stream, it will be over at twitch.tv/TLSGsnap. Make sure to give it a follow so that you don't miss any of our live streams. You can check out the video on demand if you're not able to make it live. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. This has been TLSG. Later, guys.